Hibernores hibernus ipsus. Níos Gaelí ná na Gael féin. More Irish than the Irish themselves. So there's a phrase that's been used throughout Irish history. First used to comment on the Anglo-Norman settlers into Ireland and how they settled and became part of Ireland. This saying goes back centuries, almost a millennia at this point, and was first coined from the original settlers who came, or I should say were invited. The story starts in the late 12th century with the Anglo-Norman conquest of Ireland. It was led by a man commonly known to many as Strongbow, or the Earl of Pembroke. Now, Strongbow was invited by a man by the name of Diarmait MacMurrough. He was a deposed king of Leinster, and definitely a man deserving of a video of his own. But in the coming years after the conquest of Ireland by the Normans, an interesting thing happened that repeated itself throughout Irish history, but was very noticeable and commented upon by scholars and even lawmakers of the time. The interesting thing about it was that these settlers, after time, they initially saw themselves as conquerors, and they brought Norman culture, they brought the language, they brought Norman law, and generally a sense of superiority. And this is something you see in England at the time through the Norman ruling class still speaking their common native tongue, not the local tongue. However, one thing that we notice with the Anglo-Normans in Ireland is that very rapidly they started to settle and become part of Ireland. By the 14th century, many of these Anglo-Normans had adopted the Irish culture fully. They had adopted the Irish customs, the Irish language, and for many of them, even the Gaelic dress. They intermarried with native Irish families, and they became deeply connected to Ireland and the land itself. They embraced Brehon law and the Irish legal system, and they abandoned a lot of their feudal practices. Again, this is where the term is later referred to this group of people and their ancestors who still hold various plots of land around the country and are still very common names that you will see throughout Ireland. Now, this cultural transformation was so profound that in England, the authorities became very alarmed. So in 1366, the Statutes of Kilkenny were enacted. These were basically a set of laws designed to prevent the Anglo-Normans in Ireland from becoming too Irish. Now, this forbade the practice of intermarriage. It forbade the practice of speaking the Irish language, of wearing Irish clothing, of basically becoming, like I said, too Irish. This was a threat to the ruling class, and the rulers in England wanted to make sure that their vassals in Ireland weren't going to go too native, so to speak. So by 1596, the famous English poet Edmund Spenser comments on how the lords in Ireland at the time began to adopt this trait as well. So he's paraphrased as saying in his somewhat controversial treatise, A View of the Present State of Ireland, he talks about the people who had moved into Ireland, and he talks and says that, "What is it you say of so many of us as remain English of them? Why are not they, were once English, at dying English still? No, for the most part, them are denigrated and grown almost mere Irish, yea, and more malicious to the English than the very Irish themselves." So it shows that a lot of these people and English ruling class who had moved to Ireland essentially became Irish and became hostile towards the English ruling class. They did not wish to be governed over by, at this point, many of whom would have viewed these people as foreigners to them. You know, these are ruling powers who want tithes, they want tax, and they want to govern the country and rule over people who have no real connection to this ruling class in England. So how did this term evolve over the centuries? This term continued to be brought up over and over. And we see the original Latin term being brought up in the 17th century. And it is very interesting because it symbolises the cultural assimilation that happens in Ireland over and over. And it really shows the very strong cultural connection that Irish people have to their heritage and history. And you can really see this in the Irish diaspora and how they have spread out across the world and really sought to maintain their heritage. It's really something to be applauded. Now, the phrase itself was somewhat romanticised in later years. When we move into the 18th and 19th century, it had some specific connotations and certain things that were quite interesting in their own right. Now, often this was used as a way to bridge the gap between the settlers who came in the plantations and the Irish who were already here. Now, that's a very controversial topic and one that I will perhaps touch on in future, but I wanted to discuss this interesting poem that was written. And this was written by Thomas Davies. He was a young Irelander, and the poem itself is called The Geraldines, and it concerns itself about the Fitzgerald dynasty, who date all the way back to those early Anglo-Norman settlers. And the poem goes as such: these Geraldines, not long our air they breathed, not long they fed on venison in Irish water seethed. Not one had their children been Irish mothers nursed, when from the full and genial hearts an Irish feeling burst. The English monarch strove in vain by law and force and bribe to win the Irish thoughts and ways, this more than Irish tribe. For still they clung to fosterage, to brehve, cloak and bard. What king dare say to Geraldine, your Irish wife discard? I really love this poem because it really romanticizes the past, and it really just shows how this cultural phenomenon goes back centuries and yet is a real emblem of Irishness and the distinctive nature of Ireland. Something that the powers that conquered Ireland in various different forms really did try to stomp out. We have a very strong culture in the country that we really did try to hold on to. And you see it being repeated and brought up over and over throughout Irish history. And it's something that I find absolutely fascinating. So, in modern day terms, in the 19th and 20th century, this is often used for, like I mentioned, the Irish diaspora. So in modern terms, it's become almost a term of endearment, but also a term used to deride people who, albeit often well-meaning, try to be more Irish than the Irish. It's something that we do see come up in Ireland over and over. People who, members of the diaspora, for example, who move back to Ireland or they visit on holiday, and they try to emanate things that they've seen in film or on TV or have been told. And there is many, many cases with which Irish people see this and see these people being more Irish than the Irish and telling people like myself who are born and raised here how they are in many ways more Irish than we are. I've had someone I know quite well who's moved to the country and tell me in many ways, because I live in a city, that they are more Irish than me. It is something that comes up and it is something that happens, and it's a very interesting thing that happens because, like I said, this goes back almost a millennia at this point, and it is this amazing cultural thing that seems to just happen over and over in Ireland. And it is something that I wanted to talk about because it's something that you see come up in Irish martial arts, for example, people who wish to dress in a more Irish way. And the problem is most of our traditions, as you see when it comes to even these people who integrated into Ireland, they fought against these cultural norms being stomped out. They were part of a resistance to that cultural destruction. And sadly, most of our traditions, most of our culture, most of our dress have been stomped out. We do have a wonderful group of people in this country who are maintaining our Irish language and our music and many other traditions. However, a lot of our traditions have simply changed, as they have in many other countries. And we don't really have a lot of the cultural iconography and dress that you might see in other areas. And people want this, they want to be Irish, but you know, we have modernized very rapidly, and sometimes it can be looked down upon and derided by Irish people when we see people going a bit over the top with these things. So I do hope you enjoyed this video. It was one I wanted to touch on, and I wanted to do something a bit more lighthearted and a bit more cultural, because I know there's a lot of people coming to my channel from various different backgrounds, and if you enjoyed this video, let me know. If you would like to see more videos of a similar vein, please do let me know. Thank you to my best friend Luke for the new microphone. Hopefully the audio will be slightly better. It is something I wanted to improve for this year, so a huge thank you to him. I have a lot of projects in the work at the moment. I am going to go on a big exploration of archery over the next few months. A little bit delayed in some aspects of it, mainly due to flu season. It's taken most of my family out over the past few weeks, but I have a lot of really interesting stuff coming over the next few months. This year is going to be a really, really great year for us. So everyone who has subscribed and supported the channel, I can't thank you enough. For those of you who've made it this far, I have released an introduction to Irish stick fighting course on my Patreon. So if you're interested in that, you will find it in the description. And if you want to attend classes or want to do online classes with me, you'll find details down there as well. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And slán.